Hi, everybody. So excited to be here today and share what we're going to be doing. Quick overview of the agenda, talk a little bit about where Zirks came from, how it works, what this whole 30% boost is about, key takeaways, and of course Q&A as Jim mentioned. So to start off, we did entice you here with the how to grow your margins by 30%. We could make this very short and say by ordering through Zirks and wrap it up with Q&A, but we won't do that. I do want to provide a quick disclaimer for you. So I am not a finance guy. I studied film in college. So we're going to take away any financial issues here. The claim I can make is I do run a company based heavily on gross margins. So that's my point of expertise on this. So jumping in a little bit, and I know there's some of you on the call here today who are familiar with Ernest, but to provide the origins of where this comes from. So Ernest Machine, which owns Zirks and develops Zirks, is an old company, 72 years now. We began importing in the 1950s, at that point from Europe, and still today import quite a bit from the Far East, Europe, as well as source domestically. What we do, though, is we sell through distribution. So we're selling to distributors, large and small, vendor-managed inventory operators, the big catalog folks, and mom and pops everywhere. What Ernest fits, and the market we fit, what we do for those distributors is not exclusively, but a lot of our business is small volume, quarter kegs going out the door, the day of needed. We do custom packaging, and then a lot of secondary services. Now, this isn't intended to be a commercial for Ernest when I share all that, but rather to anchor you in what we do at Ernest, and we'll understand more about where Zirks came from and how it's different. So 10 years ago, unfortunately, some of us still remember this very closely, 10, 11 years ago, 2009, the market went in the toilet. Started in 2008, and a lot of us suffered through a really rough year. So as we were sitting at the end of that 2009, getting into 2010, the battle wounds had healed a bit. We started really asking ourselves, okay, how are we going to grow this company again? How are we going to get back to where we were? It does take time. So this was 10 years ago. And so what we asked ourselves was, what do the customers really want and what are they looking for? We had lots of ideas, and how we looked at that time was 2 primary distribution centers, one in Indiana, one in Indianapolis, one in Atlanta, Georgia, and the main offices in Cleveland. And this worked well, fits well for our geographical model, fits well for our customers, and works fine. But to grow, we decided, let's see what we could do. So we got out, talked to some consultants, kind of begrudgingly, and what they said was, when we look at the market, when we look at what's happening, where trends are going, you really need to expand your footprint. You got to look at these other geographical markets that you're in, getting to those bigger customer concentrations sooner, getting to them, in 2 days, 1 day, same day is going to be critical. And when we looked at all this, we said that's a big footprint. That's a lot. So basically, they were encouraging us to expand, and I asked them, I said, so this then leads us to what is our competitive edge? And they said, well, it's a tough market. I said, so great, we're going to compete on price? They said, well, that is definitely a component of it. Conversation stopped there, and we went to our list of dumb ideas that we had recently considered, and fortunately, they were not at the top, but these consultants came right in at number 4. So they claimed that place of this idea of build warehouses everywhere. We decided, yeah, that's not going to be our strategy at all for a whole bunch of reasons, and won't get into those quite yet. So what are we going to do is the question. And looked completely the other way from consultants, went a much cheaper route and read a book called Blue Ocean Strategy, which is a book out of 2004, and covers this idea of how to bring innovation to your business. This is not a presentation on innovation, but I do want to provide the rooting and the origins of this idea. So Blue Ocean Strategy looks at this idea and says, in the red oceans, where everybody is and everybody's competing and everybody is trying to compete with minor differences, that's where all the sharks are feeding, and those oceans are filled with blood. So look to the blue oceans to find better ideas. do something completely different, ask lots of questions, and get rid of the sacred cows. I believe that's also where I learned sacred cows make the best hamburger. So we decided to look at that. And there was an article or a company featured in the book, Cirque du Soleil, which I'd been a little familiar with, but did not know their history. Cirque du Soleil, founded by a guy named Guy Libertor, and what they decided to do was innovate the circus industry. So at that time, circuses are lots of animals and kids screaming for things, and he decided they were going to do something different with the circus industry. They looked at what was the biggest challenge of the circus. And the biggest problem that they knew was the animals. The animals in a circus operation represent 70% of the operational budget. And they're the primary cause of all sorts of challenges. Certainly expensive, lots of unknowns when you're dealing with large animals or people, and lots of bottlenecks around that. So what they decided to do was, can we create a circus that has no animals? Can we look at this blue ocean of the circus and create entertainment with this idea around a circus, but without the expense? So took that idea, and I know this is a big leap, being a nut and bolt company, but said, what animals can we get rid of? So we looked into our operation and said, when we look, what are the problems we're dealing with? Yes, we have expenses, we have unknowns, and we have big bottlenecks. Where are those? Can we identify those easily? And it's the warehouse. No disrespect to warehouse operations, and we're happy with the ones that we run, but you got to admit, they are super expensive. There are lots of unknowns, and they are the source of a lot of bottlenecks. So we thought, would it be possible to get rid of our warehouses? Could we completely eliminate that expense and do something different? So when we present this idea, of course, the answer is, yeah, right, that's impossible. That's too big of a task. There's no way you can do that. Until we had our aha moment and came up with this idea, Zirks. So when we thought about blue ocean strategy, thought, well, how do you get rid of the warehouse in a blue ocean strategy? Look to what's on the ocean. And that's where we found a whole lot of floating warehouses. So in a blue ocean strategy for Zirks, the idea, get rid of the warehouses, and how do we do that differently? And that's what we're here to talk about. So Zirks was born out of this idea, and there's a couple elements around it that I want to share. The main idea behind Zirks is that we buy commodities from factories that we know and trust. These are some background there. These are factories that Ernest has been working with for years, factories we've toured, factories we've audited, etc. Second, what we will do differently, or what we do differently in Zirks, is we purchase full containers of a singular item. That does happen in our industry. There are people out there who have that kind of volume, but it is definitely not the norm. Over the years, companies like Ernest has beat down suppliers to make 1 or 2 pallets the minimum run. So the kind of opportunities that come with purchasing a full container of one item, so 24, 26 pallets of a 5/8-11 flange nut would be in a container. Once those parts are on the water, they become available for instant purchase. So let me just pause there. We've all experienced delays on the import side. The last thing that we want to do in this Zirks model is to present our customers with, hey, you can buy this thing, it's supposed to ship in 4 weeks. You build your plan around those 4 weeks, and then we send an email out that says, oops, we have a problem, factory's going to be late. That's where everything goes to hell and problems arise. So parts are on the once the parts are on the water, that's when they're available for sale. We use a dynamic pricing model. So what people ask for is fast and cheap. Well, we're going to let you name the terms. So based on the quantity you buy and how quickly you pay, that dictates your price. And we can show you that in a second. Once those parts arrive at the port that we're bringing that container into, we'll ship them directly to you or whatever it is that you've assigned in the web order process for those parts to go. So, as I said, a web-based model, everything is self-serve, everything happens from the site and allows you to self-serve in essence, your import buys for the commodities that we're bringing in. I do want to show a video, and I do recognize that we're relying on some technology here, so there might be a bit of a lag. So just if you could bear with me. This is the site that you would be on. This is a user going to the shopping fastener section. They would find the part that they're looking for. They would view that product, and then here they're at an informational screen about that part. Everything you need to know about that part is available. And then with the slider, you'll notice to the right, the cost per piece is being calculated as that slider is dragging over. So you get it there, you're going to buy 4 pallets, and then you decide what would my price be if I was to pay ACH immediately versus going to credit card or to terms, and the prices calculate on the fly. So we all know, hey, in the business operation, if you buy more from me and pay me right away, you're going to get a better price. That is what this allows for customers to really dictate the price it is that they want to pay. So you want to get down and dirty, buy the entire container and pay us ACH, and everybody's going to be happy. So from here, we're not going to go through the whole process, but this is where you would proceed to your shipping, and at that point, actually choose the carrier that you want to use, where the stuff is going to go, and you'll see the port that that item is coming into. I think in this example, we showed LA, but if that's coming into Savannah or Seattle, New Jersey, you would see that, and then your shipping would be from that port, and you would see your total shipping charges and everything happen at that checkout. All of that is live right now. I encourage anyone to go to the site and buy everything we have. That would be wonderful. Would anyone who buys it all, though, maybe we'll send a T-shirt out or something. So we'll work on that. So that is basically how the site works. So now we enticed you to come into this to talk about this idea of 30% margin improvement. And again, I'm not a finance guy, but I understand this very, very well. So why can we do this, and where's that 30% come from? It comes from this. It comes from getting rid of all of the costs associated with a warehouse operation. We believe, and this is rough numbers, but the moment we bring something in and that makes it from the port into our facility, at that moment it's 30% more expensive. It's been touched, it's now being insured, we're paying taxes on it, it's taking up space in the inventory, somebody's receiving it, hopefully they're not damaging it, but immediately those parts become 30% more expensive just by coming in our door. So by getting rid of that, we believe we can pass that 30% savings on to you. So the math behind that, and I recognize that there is looks like there's a range of different people on this call, from owners of businesses to supplying managers to sourcing agents to salespeople. And so this math covers a lot of that ground. But we just look at the 30%, our standard, what's the cost of goods sold, what does my markup look like, the selling price, the margin percent, and dollars. Traditional distributor, and I'll just say traditional, they're going to buy that part, they're going to mark it up 50%, sell it for $1.50, and earn their 33% margin, putting $50 of gross margin below. And that works fine. So if we look and say, okay, so what do we do with a 30%, where do I get that 30% rather? The price point for Zirks items, we've seen, and we're early still, but we've seen anywhere from 40% as high as 60% cost reductions in our purchasing power by doing things the way that we're doing them. So, and when I say that, I'm wearing 2 hats. I'm wearing the earnest hat, so someone who's been importing and imports a lot, to the Zirks hat. As I start wearing those 2 hats, I got to tell you, Zirks looks like a much better supplier than who Ernest has been buying from, but that's another story. So taking a look at this, the 30%, sorry. There's a 45% savings in the cost of goods. So your $100, using easy numbers here, brings that down to $55. The markup fact, and this is an issue for any of the salespeople in the room, I apologize, but don't operate on markup. And that's another webinar maybe we should look at doing, but we should not be operating on markup. Because if we just operate on markup, what happens, and we've seen it, I think a lot of us have seen it, it's a death spiral for distributors, and over time it puts the company out of business. So let's just stick with the fact that our customers are used to paying 150. If we can buy it better and improve our margin by 30 points, right? So going from a 33% margin to a 63% margin, that's the 30 margin points that we're talking about here. Now, very easy to get excited there. The bigger number, the more exciting is what it really does to the gross margin dollars. And that's where we're talking about the 90% increase in gross margin. Now, I know, well, hey, we could just do this by getting better cost savings on our purchasing. That's true, but I think it's very difficult to find a 45% cost savings out there in the commodity market for import goods, unless you're buying through Zirks. So be happy to get back into this slide at another time. I know there's some math there that I already said I wasn't qualified to do. Some of the challenges around importing direct. And for those of us who've done it, you probably have seen all of these. Certainly there is this idea of the limited volume, or I would even say the minimum volume, going overseas looking for a part, even domestically looking for a part, and they let you know, yeah, the minimum on that is going to be what winds up being 2 pallets, 3 pallets. That makes importing direct a bit of a challenge. Then we wind up buying those parts, through an importer, domestic manufacturer, and pay a lot more. Factory delays. This happens all the time. In fact, in launching Zirks, we were delayed at least 2 months because of factory delays. So Zirks experiences these problems as well, which goes back to we only want to sell when stuff is on the water. Lead times are a challenge. Depending on relationships with suppliers, you could be at 90 days, which is pretty amazing, plus time in transport. But we're seeing lead times, the norm, 20 to 24 weeks, and that shifts and can shift rather dramatically. Carrying costs, something that a lot of us don't want to admit to. The standard number is you should be putting 2% cost, or 2% adding that to your cost for every month, something sitting there. Most operators ignore that, but the fact is there really is carrying cost associated with something. If you're selling something at a 50 margin and it takes you a year to burn through that, again, I'm getting into some other topics here, you're not cash positive on that until 10 months in. So there really truly are carrying costs that we need to be dealing with. Supplier management, it's a long flight to Asia, and it's tough to get through some of those negotiations. It's a huge component of it. As I already mentioned, inventory turns. So we find a supplier overseas that can make something, we have to buy a little too much, and now I have to sit on a 1-year or 2-year supply. So all sorts of challenges around that idea of importing direct. So case study. So we're lucky enough to have one of these that I'm excited to share about. Someone that we knew who was kind of going along this journey with us on Zirks as we've been developing this. We launched, we had our first couple items up there, and I got a call. I'll call him Tim. Got a call from Tim, and he said, well, I don't know how you did it, but well done. I said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. He said, I need the first 2 items that you have. I said, that's great. Tim, happy to help you out. You should be doing this through the web store because you're costing me money by talking to me. And I was happy to take the call. And I said, how much do you need? And he said, I need everything. I said, I know you mentioned that. Well, how many pallets? He said, I need the entire container. Now, that was not supposed to happen at all on our first run. And I, of course, had to probe and say, so tell me more about this. He said, well, we got a new supplier. They've been performing pretty well. We liked everything about them. We built their lead times into our system. And we just got the call that they have a machine down and they're going to be late. I was, oh, how late? He said 6 to 8 weeks. I said, oh, so what were you hoping I could do? This is a juicy opportunity, right? So he says, I need the entire container, and I've gone through the site. I'm seeing it. You're still 18% higher than my cost. I said, I don't understand. Your cost of buying where? He said, well, buying direct. I said, all right, let's back up here and review what Zirks provides. I have a full container of an item that is due into LA in 2 weeks. You have a supplier that has just told you that you are down, that they are down and they're going to be late. You have a line for your customer. This is a VMI supplier who is going to be in a line down situation. and you're complaining about an entire container that's 18% over your cost, the call ended pretty shortly after that with the PO that came over. So it was an amazing course of events that just happened to work out. A lot of high-fiving on our end, and on his end, what he shared later was this completely bailed us out. There was no other option. So I should have changed the pricing immediately. I know there's a couple of you people knowing that right away, but we didn't do that because that's not how we operate. So it was a perfect example of Zirks working for a customer, and I'll tell you, they're big name, big importer. They know what they're doing. They have these problems all the time. We happen to have the right item at the right time that helped them out. Oh, and they took a half a container of the other part that was a half inch shorter. So that worked out great for us too. So those are some a case study of how we fixed the problem. So where Zirks is right now, we are very much in that beta launch stage. It is very early in the process. I mentioned that this idea came around 10 years ago. So overnight, this success has launched, and here we are in the beta stage. What we see is a lot of growth opportunities with this model. Presented this to a lot of people, in the last year or so, and as it's launched and doing more of these types of presentations, we're hearing some great feedback. And some of that is how people are thinking about this as, wow, you're almost acting as a co-op. You're almost acting as that buying group that's going to start to, and I'll use the biz guy talk, aggregate the market demand, but pull in, pull in the demand from the 30, 40 different importers, distributors, wholesalers that are out there that each have a 1 pallet, 2 pallet, 3 pallet demand. Start to pull that in, buy the 5, 6 containers that need to come in and flow regularly to support that. So there's a lot going on here. We're looking at different items. The items I should back up there, we're focused on commodity fasteners here for now. So it's not typically the stuff Ernest sells. You're looking at the grade 5, grade 2 commodity stuff, the things that we are, and when I say we, I mean the industry, we're already bringing those in. We're buying them, pallets at a time or half pallets at a time. But we do see growth opportunities down the road. So this idea of dynamic market forecasting that I have here on the slide, the thought there is as we can start to really pull together the information or the usage of Zirks customers, we can start to build some good forecast models. Little voodoo involved with that, but we see the opportunities. We're excited about where it's going. We got some significant investments behind this, and really eager to see how the market responds to this. So this is, I want to provide just a snapshot, if you will, between the difference of Ernest and Zirks. I could pull Ernest out and plug in some of the names of the people on the call. I can plug in a general distributor there, but I wanted to use Ernest because I'm most familiar with it, but to show the difference between Ernest and Zirks. What Ernest does, it's that niche. It's same-day shipping. It's the bulk and the package volume, the specialty parts. Someone needs 500 pieces of something plated, drilled, and patched. And we have sales teams, available to talk customers through this. And when I say integrated support, that's the, full line supplier for someone who's got program business. They want things packaged. They want things released. They want their EDI fulfillment, all that stuff. That's what Ernest does. That's expensive to do. It's expensive to do. And yes, we charge for it. Why wouldn't we? The Zirks side, completely different. We're not talking about same day shipping. Yeah, there's a bit of a lead time. The increments are a pallet. So you're buying a pallet at a time. As I said, commodity parts, and these are industry standard parts. We're not bringing in funky things with unusual coatings. These are your standard items. It is completely web-based, and that is part of the cost as well. And what we're really built here is, hate to dumb it down to that, but it's fast, cheap, and easy. So a little bit of a overview there. Key takeaways here for you, and I don't know what your takeaways are, but I'm going to give you 5 that I think are real important here, is that Zirks provides super fast lead times. So if you need that item sourcing overseas, 20 weeks, 24 weeks, Ernest could have it as little as a week, maybe a couple days. The timing is right. Container pricing when you're just buying 1 pallet. Those of you doing the imports, have at it. Get your supplier to quote you a full container. You'll see what's there. You don't have to buy the full container through Zirks, though, just the one pallet. Getting a little lofty here, but this really, for us and for the industry, reimagines what importing can be, what it can look like, and what it can do for importers and just customers of importers. Zirks is used as needed. It is something you can log in today and have an account opened in 2 minutes and place your order. There's no fees associated with it. There's no user fees or anything like that. It really is a web-based platform. And finally, my hope is that this changes everything you ever knew about anything. Would be amazing, but I'll stick with just importing for now. So with that, I guess the next step is you can check us out at Zirks.io, which is the site is live. There's, at this point, I think we only have 2 or 3 items that are on the water. There's a place where you can click to see what's coming, and you can be notified of when those items are available for sale. There's also a polling platform where you can provide us with the feedback of items you'd like to see. So with that, we go to Q&A, correct?
Correct.
All right.
So we had several questions come through during the webinar, and then we had a few people who, when they registered, had asked some questions. So the first one is, what is the minimum volume in which to consider importing?
Right. So really, I mean, it's whatever you can get a factory to make. So you've got some great relationships with factories. You can get them down to a coil of steel, or I should say a pallet of parts. But bringing in a pallet of parts that you might be sitting on for a year might not be a great import candidate. We look at it, it's hard not to ignore, hey, I got a 20% savings or 30% savings. But when you're sitting on it for a year and bleeding it through and maybe even risking that your customer is going to cancel that remaining pallet, that's a challenge. So I'd say that minimum value to consider importing is really up for everyone's consideration. But the best volume is a full container of one part.
Great. Next question is, what types of products are most suited to importing?
Yeah, so our focus, again, is the commodity parts. So, again, I'm wearing 2 hats here, but those of you who know Ernest, we do sell a lot of that specialty parts. So some grade 8 left-hand jam nuts. We will not be offering those through Zirks because you can't sell a pallet of those in 2 years. So the types of products we're looking at are those high-volume commodity parts that are really out there. I don't want to say everywhere, but they're being brought in already in volume.
So that question is a good way into another segue into another question that just came in, which is, what happens if you don't sell 100% of the container?
Well, we have some good friends that told me they were going to I'm kidding. So what happens with that? There's 2 things. So we have looked at, let's say half the container is not sold. We might hold those in port and relist them. Ernest has also been in this business for a long time, so we do know who is buying what. And so those would probably, and I can't say in all cases, but in many cases, Ernest is the buyer of those. So those would go into the general inventory of Ernest. As I said earlier, though, once they come in the door, they're 30% more expensive. So Ernest is the backbone behind that.
Another question that came in throughout the webinar is, are we able to see the manufacturer name of the product on the water?
Yes. So MTRs are available with every purchase. It would show country of origin. I am looking to my partner here. Does it show the actual manufacturer at that time? It doesn't. It's on the MTR, though. Yeah. So I will tell you, we had in the development side, somebody said we have some factories that are approved, some that are not approved. Is there any way you could provide that to us? So we're in beta launch, but down the road with your login, we would start to add some of those factory identifications. So if you say there's no way I can bring anything in from Waitai or from a specific country, when the user logs in, they would see this item is coming from either an approved source, or it would list the source. I guess it would be up to them to see if approved or not. Great comment.
Thanks, Kirk. So another general question is, what would you consider to be the main risks of importing?
Everything, I guess, would start there. So, I mean, I'm saying that joking, but I mean, it really is everything. So we've had, again, Ernest imports a lot. We've had containers quarantined because of noxious seed. So what does that mean? Your container got pulled. They opened the doors and they saw a few leaves of a plant that were laying on the ground of the container. That container goes into quarantine. Sap, so sap coming out of the pallet, those can be quarantined because of a whole bunch of environmental issues. And you can't argue that. That's what's going to happen. You have very little control. So that's kind of on the front once it's landed here. But the risks of importing, dealing with factories that maybe you don't have long relationships with, you haven't visited, you haven't audited, everything looks good, the price looks amazing, and the parts show up, and there's threads missing. That happens often. So the ranges are everything from bad product to delays to import issues.
Got it. So this next question came in, and it just says, parts made to print, get them right the first time. Fear I'll have to eat 250,000 bad parts.
Yeah. Nobody wants to eat 250,000 of anything, actually. So I think if I understand that correctly, so Zirks would not be bringing in parts made to print. So if you're have that part and you need it made to print and it's something very special, that's not going to show up on Zirks. That would be something Ernest does traditionally with our Factory Direct program, and we run those through your standard sourcing operation with testing and PPAPs if that's what's necessary. So again, we're not going down that road with that type of item, if I understood that correctly. So.
Great. And you addressed this a little bit in the presentation, but another question that came in was, does Zirks source parts from the same manufacturers as Ernest?
Yes. Yes, we do. So again, those are manufacturers that we've been dealing with for, in some cases, 20, 30 years. And those are the Ernest supply base, and how we manage our supply base is the same way Zirks is going to manage it. We don't buy from the brokers, the people that are just putting deals together. We don't buy from people who suddenly have an extra container laying around. We don't do anything like that. They're companies that we've taken our time to vet and have good quality relationships and quality parts.
Another one that just came in is, will material and plating certifications arrive with the product?
So the test reports, plating certs would come in advance. Those would be emailed to the buyer. They would not be included on the actual pallet or the parts, which traditionally we're seeing that kind of go away. MTRs are no longer being taped to boxes. They're being delivered via email. So that's how Zirks would be handling those as well.
Great. Another one, how do you choose the parts that you import?
Very carefully, and then with a little bit of risk. So we look at our parts and recognize that there's those commodity parts that are in the space. Again, we're really good on the fastener side of things. So a 5/8 by 2.5 grade 5 flange bolt is a big mover. We sell a lot of those. We're not going to bring in something that's a fine thread, odd length part. So we're looking at those commodity parts. The other way to find those parts is this polling that we've put out there. We have got some good feedback. We don't know everything, of course. So imagine, in a perfect world, we've got 1,000 Zirk customers out there, and they're providing what they want to see. Suddenly there's trends that we're able to spot that we haven't seen before, and that will shift the parts that we bring in. So sort of sounds like crowdsourcing, to use a buzzword, but in essence, it is crowdsourcing. The more feedback we can get from people.
So another good question that came in is, I already have a pretty good plan in place when importing my main commodities. How can you help me with the items I don't buy as frequently? Is there any advantage to using you? Yeah,
so two things there. If you got that good good plan that's working importing direct, continue to do that. However, those challenges pop up, so maybe we're a good fit. The case study I talked about, they had their supply chain managed, so they didn't need us until something went wrong. With the items that you don't buy as frequently, or those items, again, the advantage there is short lead time and minimum purchase quantities of one pallet.
Great. Next one is, I understand that by purchasing on the water, Zirks is comparable to a domestic supplier when it comes to lead time. Are you always going to be less expensive than a domestic supplier?
Always? Yes. I don't see how we couldn't. I mean, yes, let's say Nucor decides to run 4 million pieces of a part and they only meant to run 400,000. Not that they would ever do that. They're going to dump those parts and they would be very, very cheap. But yeah, there's just, I mean, and again, it comes down to, some of it is, of course, the fastener manufacturing has moved overseas. It did that a long time ago. That's where the supply is. But buying a full container of one item is always going to be less expensive than a domestic supplier.
Gotcha. Another one that came through is, does the Zirks model make sense for smaller distributors and or mom and pop purchasers? And if so, how?
Sure. So, I mean, it's really great for that mom and pop that maybe, that's a technical term, mom and pop. So maybe they're thinking about importing, but they don't feel like they have enough, say, volume to attract the right supplier, or they want to find that right supplier. But they know they have the spend, and maybe they bought it through a traditional importer, wholesaler like Ernest or many of the others out there, and they want to have a go at this. This would be a perfect, very low cost, low barrier, low risk way to buy more volume. You know, it's the same parts that could be purchased from Ernest, but buying that pallet and seeing that cost savings is definitely perfect for a small company.
And are there any future plans to integrate the Zirks platform with third-party ordering systems?
I'm not sure if I understand that. So let me just take. So if that question is asking, and this is hard to do in these settings, but integrating with third-party systems, meaning could the Zirks platform tie into a customer's MRP system? That's down the road, but we got some other things to deal with first. But we have thought about that. How could this tie in either the lead times, availability, what's coming up in pricing, but even the ability for someone to place their order in their MRP and have that carry over into Zirks. Yeah, that's complicated, but if that's what the question was, that's how I'll answer that.
All right. Another one just came in. Can products ship direct to secondary process supplier rather than coming to the distributor first?
Yeah, product can ship at that checkout point when you hit the shipping. You can ship it wherever you like. You can ship it to your best friend as a birthday present. We encourage that. That can go anywhere. Yeah, that is completely up to you. So, and that touches on one thing, and I wasn't clear about it. Ernest is the importer. Zirks is the importer of record. So when that part arrives, there is no importing and processing and duties that are going to land once someone selects their shipping. All that is resolved and taken care of by Zirks prior to. So, yeah, when they're placing the order, someone is processing that, they can have it shipped to wherever they want.
Awesome. That wraps up the questions that have come through. If we want to stay on the line and give another minute or two for anybody who thinks of something that they might want to ask, we can do that. And
Great.
If you have any closing comments.
No, I'm happy to talk to anyone about this, and want to do a demo or a presentation, more of what this is with companies' purchasing teams. Love to do that. We've done that early on and had some great response. And really eager for your feedback. I'm very available and would love to have a conversation about any of this, your thoughts, your ideas, and most important, I guess, we'd like to see you log on and buy a full container of something. I mean, is that clear? Yeah. So
that's the goal.
So thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody coming today and listening to this. Excited about where we're going.
And as Kirk said, if you have any questions that weren't answered here today in the webinar, please feel free to send them to inquiry@zirks.io, or as Kirk shared, you can reach out to him directly. There were a few people that couldn't attend today who've already set up one-on-ones with Kirk that he was happy to accommodate. So please do reach out. It's a new platform. It's very forward-thinking, and we appreciate everybody's participation today. Hopefully you had some good takeaways and got you thinking about the future of importing.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.